3 o'clock on February the 7th, and I'm calling this special meeting together to order of the Point Erin Village Council. Is there anyone here with pecuniary interest?
No one.
And acknowledgement. Pecuniary interest in. We acknowledge that this land on which we are gathered today is part of the ancestral land of the Chippewa and Potawatomi peoples, referred to collectively as Anishinaabe. It is through the connection of Anishinaabe with the spirit of the land, water, and air that we recognize their unique cultures, traditions, and values. Together as treaty people, we have a shared responsibility to act with respect for the environment that sustains all life, protecting the future of those generations to come. So move on to new business. So our first item today is to talk about the St. Clair Light Street reconstruction project. And we have representatives here today from MIG to talk about it and review some of the information that came from our public meeting. Do you want me to turn it over?
Yeah, I want to set up the screen.
Okay. Okay, I'll turn it over to you, Lydia. We're just waiting for Jim's going to get this sharing set up. Okay.
I trust that council has had time to review the memo that was distributed on Friday. So just kind of a brief summary of that. We received 26 design related comments from the public. One came in late yesterday. Did incorporate that into the kind of discussion points as well. So what I've done with the presentation, kind of set it up based on the list of 4 discussion items that require kind of council action. Because some of the things that came out of the public comments will just be addressed automatically, and other ones require kind of further discussion and council direction. So first of all, we'll kind of go over the pedestrian crossing comments. It was the most significant of the comments received. So kind of touch on that. So the presentation, I kind of covered the kind of OTM, TAC manual, and kind of requirements for the design component. So the kind of what I see and what are the rules that I have to abide by a professional engineer. So we can talk about why we can or can't put pedestrian crossings in certain locations. So I thought putting this information up here would be easier than me just reciting code and whatnot. So unfortunately, you can't see that clearly. The kind of decision matrix that's actually included in the Ontario Traffic Manual, it actually goes through kind of checklist to kind of go through to determine whether a pedestrian crossing is warranted in a certain location or whether it's safe to have one in that location. And it's actually based on the number of traffic, the number of vehicles going through that location in an 8-hour period, along with the number of pedestrians. So the first kind of diamond that you see there, it actually says, basically you're asking yourself, is the 8-hour pedestrian count over 100 pedestrians? And is the 8-hour vehicle volume over 750? So on the side here, as you see, I kind of went through the different areas where the public kind of indicated that they might be interested in having a crossing, and went through kind of the pros and the cons on why pedestrian crossings can't be put in those particular locations. So for Alexandra at Michigan, Alexandra to Michigan. So in that section, the crossing cannot be permitted. So I've gone through the ADT counts that I got from Paradigm and kind of figured out the 8-hour vehicle counts and compared to the likely pedestrian counts. So at that particular section of St. Clair, the AEDT is below the threshold that you look to in this kind of checklist. And the pedestrian count is certainly not over 100 people crossing St. Clair at that location in the 8-hour period. And further to that, there is an alternate crossing available within 200 meters at Michigan. So based on that, the traffic manual says that a crossing is not suitable in that location. And that's for between Michigan and Alexandra Avenue. The other big one that kind of came up was between the section of Helena to Front Street. So in terms of AADT values, Again, the traffic counts are a bit higher in that location, but the pedestrian volumes that are like, we don't have the exact pedestrian counts. But I have never seen 100 people in 8 hours crossing St. Clair Street in that location. So the pedestrian counts really don't warrant the crossing there. And because the site is low, like Helena Street.
Thank you.
Oh, goodness. I was practicing from my screen too, and I was like, I'm gonna get it. So Helena Street, because it's within 200 meters of a crossing up front. Again, it's not warranted to have a crossing that close to an alternate crossing based on vehicle counts and pedestrian counts. So those two locations, just based on ADT and pedestrian counts, is not supported by the Ontario Traffic Manual.
Can I ask a quick question about the traffic counts, just to clarify? This was in November of last year, these traffic counts, right? They're not reflective of a summer day down in Alexandria, right?
2022 November counts, yes.
So those numbers would possibly be higher.
Higher, but in terms of, to get 100 people crossing St. Clair from the LCBO to the brewery, unless there is a particular event.
Yeah.
Like, I've never seen that many pedestrians on foot unless they're marching to protest the reconstruction of.
Yes.
St. Clair Street,
Yeah.
yeah. I just wanted to clarify where these numbers.
Yes, so in the paradigm manual that I've received, like they haven't officially handed over the report yet, but the numbers they give it says November 2020
Okay,
counts.
thank you.
But they're vehicle counts only, so they're not summer, like I have no pedestrian counts at all, so I'm not sure if that was even included in your scope of work for Paradigm.
Yeah, I believe they've got some numbers, but they would be November numbers. I think they're doing estimate. I don't know exactly, but I think there's numbers that they give us.
Okay. They didn't provide those to me,
Okay.
but again, like I said, that's why I have a question mark beside the numbers. It's kind of my thoughts that it's not likely that you will see 100 people crossing in an 8-hour period. And even if you do, between Helena and Front, there is an available crossing. So even if you had the higher pedestrian counts, the fact that Front Street is within 200 meters just means that it's not supported by the OTM like as a requirement for a crossing there.
That's good. Thanks.
So the next one we kind of want to touch on is the TAC manual kind of stopping distance. So I did bring up when the comments came up at the public meeting, I kind of explained to the public that to have a crossing near a bend in the road is very hazardous because of sight lines. And in addition to sight lines, because your sight lines are limited, you have to factor in the stopping distance. So the second that I can perceive a pedestrian or even a pedestrian at a crossing, my brain has to process that information and send the information to my foot to stop the car. And then once I hit the brake, I still have a certain distance that it takes for me to stop. And based on a 50-kilometer-hour road, that distance in the TAC manual is 65 meters. So what I did is I went through the different curves along St. Clair Street and figured out where are the zones where you cannot have a crossing just based on the stopping distance. So in red, just to kind of highlight it, I put a red and green, so possible areas versus areas that just don't have the proper stopping distance. So from the north side of Alexandra, so Michigan to Alexandra, if we were going to put a crossing at Alexandra, it would be on the north side. There's maps on the next slide, but if we were to put a crossing on the north side of Alexandra, there's not enough distance between the end of the bend in the road to that crossing location. So even if someone coming out of that bend got on the straight run and immediately saw a pedestrian crossing, there's not enough space for them to safely stop without causing harm. So again, curve in the road at Charles Street. So if you're to put a crossing on the north side of Charles Street, again, we don't have the available distance from the curve to allow for adequate stopping. On the south side of Charles Street, that would be a consideration because it is over the stopping distance. The curve in the road to Bridge Street, so that's after Ironworks, that curve in the road, once you get out of there, I determined, so on the south side of, or southwest side, the road bends, southwest side of Bridge Street is not a good spot for a crossing because again, you don't have that stopping distance, but the other side of Bridge Street, there is available room. Helena, there is not enough stopping distance for a crossing at either side of the Helena intersection based on that curve. We just wouldn't see somebody with time to actually stop. So if you go to based on the pedestrian counts and these stopping distances, there's just certain locations along St. Clair and Light Street that it's not safe to have a crossing in those locations, despite there was a lot of public interest in having one at Helena. The TAC manual and the ATM just don't support a crossing there for safety reasons. Go to the next slide. So based on kind of that discussion, I made it more visual because I know it's a lot of numbers on that. So basically, I've determined where it is possible, based on TAC manual requirements and OTM requirements, where a possible pedestrian crossover can be put. And this is what we have. So from Charles Street to the north side of Bridge Street are the available locations. So you can see in green where our proposed crossing was in front of 517 that nobody liked. But again, in terms of better locations, it's only on the straight run, and no matter whose house you put in front, you're going to get similar comments back from the public. So these are this is the available stretch. So it's straight runs on certain sides of existing intersections. And it's not ideal to have a crossing at an uncontrolled intersection. So it's always a recommendation for the OTM. You try to avoid that because I know there was photographs taken in Sarnia on East Street, I believe it was, that had a crossing at an intersection that was uncontrolled. So that's not an ideal situation, but it's really a balance of getting the crossing that you need versus safety. So ideally, it would be on a straight run, not near an intersection, but at these particular intersections, we can make a case for supporting the crossing on those locations in terms of stopping distances and sight lines. But again, the number of pedestrians that actually frequent this area, there's not enough indication that there's enough foot traffic to actually require you to have a crossing. So pedestrians can still cross in these locations, but to provide a dedicated crossing with the ladder and the flashing lights, there's not really the pedestrian numbers currently that I'm aware of, unless Paradigm comes back with something else, or perhaps the multi-use pathway will kind of bring people out walking in these areas, but you are not required by the TAC manual or the OTM to provide a crossing based on the numbers that we have. So it's really, you're looking at more of a desired situation to provide connectivity, or because the public has been asking kind of thing in a particular location, but really the locations that people have asked for are not within the available space that we actually can put a crossing. So a lot of the requests were Helena, further past Charles Street to connect to behind the arena, but because of the bends in the road, we just are not able to put crossings in those locations. So this is the available run. If you do want to put a crossing in, our recommendation would be anywhere within the straight line stretch. So really looking for council direction on if they want to provide a crossing, and if they do, is any area along this run of interest.
Do you want to offer up comments?
Let's address it now, or
I'm just asking, do you want to deal with this one right now?
Sure.
Tim?
Sure. I know Greg had done some work on crossings, and I had suggested that you said it had to be a controlled crossing,
Yes.
right? So I know we've talked before about stops and all this, and my idea was we put a three-way stop there, and then you've got a controlled stop.
We're going to address, maybe it'd be a good idea to address stop signs.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna just repeat what I'm gonna say next. So how do we get through stop signs? I think that'd be a good idea.
Okay, that's fair.
so should we then just let you finish and then do our questions?
Perhaps,
Okay, that's
because
good.
the stop sign.
Yeah.
It relates.
ties.
Okay,
Okay.
so let's carry on.
Yep, no problem.
Stop. sign. I knew it was something. So again, I went through the OTM and kind of just put kind of the description that's in there. So in the OTM, it specifies what are the warrants for an all-way stop. So when is it appropriate to put a stop sign in? So again, related to traffic volume, the total vehicle volume on all intersection approaches exceeds 350 for the highest hour recorded. So in 1 hour, do we have 350 cars stopping on Light Street or St. Clair Street or any one of those crossing streets? The AADT values indicate absolutely not for a 1 hour period. So from a traffic volume warrant, a stop sign is not warranted anywhere else on St. Clair Street currently. In terms of a collision warrant, you would look at putting in a stop sign if you had a high incident frequency, which is defined as 4 collisions per year over a 3-year period, and those collisions have to be related to turning movements. So when someone's turning right or left, have there been 4 instances per year for the last 3 years at any one of these intersections? I don't have the accident collision history. I'm not aware of any accidents that have happened. So again, from a collision perspective, it perhaps isn't warranted. Obviously, we have to see the collision data on it to confirm. The next kind of section in the OTM, it actually goes through what is an inappropriate use of a stop sign. I kind of highlight the ones of note. Stop signs are not speed control devices. So that was a lot of comments we got from the public meeting, was that let's put a stop sign in to reduce speed. Like stop signs, the purpose of it is to help with turning movements, not in speed control. Because actually by putting a stop sign on a straight run, you're more likely to get more rear end collisions than actually reduce speed. So again, where it's not suitable, we'll have a stop sign where visibility of the sign is hampered by curves or grades. We have one of those. So at Alexandra, we have that coming out of that bend, coming from the south. It's hard to see, and you don't have enough stopping distance to actually stop at a stop sign if you're not aware that it's there. So again, it would be unsafe to put a stop sign in that location because of that visibility on that bend. And where any other traffic device controlling the right of way is permanently placed within 250 meters. So Michigan is less than 250 meters away from Alexandra. So again, the stop sign is not warranted at Alexandra because there is already stop control further. So again, from that perspective, the stop sign at Alexandra is not warranted and actually would present more hazardous situation than it would kind of benefit. And same with the other intersections. Again, putting a stop control can't be used for reducing speed. And if there's not the traffic counts to support it, putting a stop sign would be more hazardous than helpful, according to the OTM. So again, so to touch on your point about starting this crossing that particular location, they might have ADT counts and pedestrian counts that warrant having that. So it's a balance between risk versus reward. So being that the park is close by, they would have done a traffic study and counted pedestrians to determine that that is a requirement at that location to protect the high number of pedestrians that are crossing. And same with Clinton, Wyoming. Again, they have a multi-use trail there, and again, they have pedestrian counts to support putting that crossing and looking at it from a risk-reward perspective and collision history. So anything can be done, except kind of take the tools that are available to you and the kind of standards that are out there, and then you do have to apply judgment because at the end of the day, you're trying to improve safety. But it's a balance between like it was all about safety. We put crosswalks everywhere, but again, it's not financially viable to do that. So we kind of follow the rules of the OTM and attack manual to kind of standardize things across the province so that people know what to expect when they're walking or driving. So just to kind of show where it was, so putting a stop sign at Alexandra, that curve, just showing that curve, we don't have enough stopping distance. So a car coming around that bend, if they, for whatever reason, don't see the stop sign ahead note or sign that's there, they won't have time to stop before getting to that stop sign. And if someone's crossing the intersection at that stop sign, that would present a serious hazard, especially since it's frequented by a lot of children. So on-street parking, there wasn't too many comments come through on this, despite how much on-street parking we were removing on the bends and whatnot. So I was actually surprised there. I did speak to the owner of Ice Cream Galore, and they were happy about, well, satisfied to lose one parking space for the benefit of getting that patio area. So looking for council direction on whether everyone's okay with having that patio area in general versus the parking space.
If I may, I'm okay with the space, but not calling it a patio area. I think we should call it a gathering area or because
Paved boulevard.
yes, rather than a patio, because a patio denotes that they're going to have tables, chairs,
Yeah.
umbrellas, and I don't think that's the intention.
Okay, and that would be a discussion that you'd have to have with Ice Cream Galore, because I think when I was speaking to them, they did reference the Taco Bosco does have a patio area, we would fit this right away. So kind of leave that up to further discussion, but we can call it a paved boulevard because it is paved currently between the sidewalk and their building. It's just we're widening the boulevard and we're just paving the space that used to be paved, and so it's a bit bigger. So we'll call it a paved boulevard.
So no grassed area there at all, Lydia, just
There
complete
is
hard surface.
so hard surface between the building and the sidewalk, and then between the sidewalk and the curb,
Okay.
there'll be a grass strip.
Yeah,
Skinny ones, tall skinny ones.
and flowering.
Too close to the point.
Yes, too close to the corner for that, but everywhere else, yes, where I can put a tree, what's the tree budget? Have a number for that? So the next one, we kind of discussed it a number of times further along. So I have removed one parking space in front of the police station just so that cars turning right onto St. Clair don't collide with a car that's pulling out of that parking space. And that's why the boulevard on the police side is a bit longer. But if everybody wanted that to gain that one parking space back there, that would be a reasonable request. So just looking for direction on whether we want to continue that bulb out into the front of the police station, or if we want to gain that one parking space back.
Isn't there a concern about the bulb out at that corner?
I'm just going to address that. That's related to turning
Right.
radius, but that's not related to the length of the bulb out, how
Okay.
far down St. Clair it goes.
Okay.
So I extended that based on kind of recommendations from Paradigm, so that the cars pulling out or pulling into that parking space, someone coming right around the corner from Michigan wouldn't collide with an open door. But I did have some comments along the way that maybe the police station wouldn't want to lose that one parking space.
Well, they don't, but if we have to take it, we have to take it, right? That parking space has been in contention for a while.
Okay. Because yeah, they do
We
have.
wanted it to be gone previously, but they said they needed it. They don't have a big parking area. And they didn't want to give it up, but if it's a safety issue, then
Especially in the summer months because I mean, most people parking that space would be for the ice cream place.
Yeah.
So in terms of, even reducing the amount of, someone coming out of the car and crossing, not at the crossing to get to ice cream boulevard, again, would be a hazard. People come around that corner from Michigan.
I'm talking about the wrong space. The space I was talking about was on Michigan.
Yeah.
That
Oh,
was
on
one
Michigan. No, so they still
Yeah.
have their parking on Michigan?
No, we actually took it away.
There's no parking there.
They're still parking there.
A little further.
Yeah, they are,
Yeah, I
But-
saw it yesterday.
but the
So-
bylaw says you can't.
Yeah.
And that was my question was, right now, on that section in front of the police station, there's the yellow curb.
Mhm.
So are we talking extending that down or just because we have to keep that based on our bylaw? Like we got, 15 meters around the corner? Can't park, and then you go in parking spot
On St. Clair Street.
on St. Clair. There's two right now in front of. Or
There are two,
there's close to two,
yes,
depending on what vehicles park.
before you get to their actual
They put two
driveway.
truck- They can't put two trucks in, because then they impede on the yellow.
Yeah, so I removed the two available parking spaces between the stop sign and their driveways.
So that bulb out includes the 15-meter setback,
Yes,
and it's a little bit bigger than 15.
it's bigger than the 15 meters.
What is the length of the bulb out? Approximately?
I can tell you, so the minimum from a stop sign that you usually do parking is a minimum of 9 meters. I think Paradigm recommended at least 10, if not more. So that's the absolute minimum, so. But ideally, the more the better, because again, when you have turning movements, you're more likely to have an incident of whether it's a car door or someone pulling out and getting T-boned. So it's better for safety again, because I think we're so busy in the summer. I still do recommend not having that parking space, but I didn't know if it came up with police having been a serious loss for them.
So currently there's two, and this will leave them with one, or leave them with zero.
So perhaps it'd be worth circling back to them and
So that goes from the stop sign right to their
their driveway.
driveway.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, okay.
So the best I could get back for them with the bulb outs there, still there, would be one. But again, my recommendation is to not have them there.
None?
in front of a police station. So they would still have parking on Michigan, and they would still have parking on the opposite side of the ice cream, and further up past their driveways, they're still on street parking.
So in fact, there is no parking on Michigan. for them.
Further up Michigan,
Oh,
Yeah,
right?
further up.
Like,
The police aren't gonna park up
well,
a half block away or 2 blocks
on-
away.
on-
They did yesterday.
I mean, walking 2 minutes to your car from a parking space, is
Yeah,
so like
I
there
agree.
is still, so as you can see past the driveway for the police station, there is like a parking zone on St. Clair past the police station. So it's just walk a few more feet rather than park directly from the building. So it's not like they don't have options. It's just they don't have options that close to the corner.
So if I may just clarify, so in that picture on the left, I see a police car, right? So you're saying that bulb out is gonna go right up to almost the beginning of their driveway,
Yes, so it sweeps back in to meet the end of the driveway.
right? So there'd be no parking at all between Michigan and their driveway. And the
And-
parking would start at the
Past it.
house past the driveway.
Yes. So that was what was on the drawings.
I'm not just focused on cruisers. The front door of the building is right there. If people are coming for any reason. But if it's a safety issue and you're recommending no, I can understand that. But I'm not just focused on cruisers on the street. It's parking for visitors.
Like I said, the best I could do is add the one.
And just to clarify, I just wanted to, but they do have a garage with a driveway. But the
Yes. Both those driveways are shown on that drawing, so right to the right edge of the red, there's the first driveway. And then the
Okay.
second driveway is kind of lumped in with the neighboring property's driveway.
Gotcha. So the bulb out whatever ramp to allow them an approach for them to get into that garage, they have to.
So the next photo you see on the right, it was the request that I got a call yesterday about adding parking spaces. The request was in front of 204 and 206. I did inform that 206 is on the bend and we cannot put parking on the bend for safety reasons. The recommendation came from Paradigm to remove the parking along this section of Alexandra coming up to that intersection to help reduce speed and again, cars coming through the bend from Light Street, basically. If a car was parked in that parking zone and trying to pull out, cars coming around the bend would be able to see them, and again, potential for collision. But on the opposite side of the road where 202 and 204 are, that's not a concern because people coming in the opposite direction they can see the cars that are parked there and you'll be able to see them pulling out. So I am recommending that we bring back 2 parking spaces on that side of the street in front of 202 and 204. So we're maintaining the bulb out, but we'll just, there is space in the boulevard to add a couple parking spaces there. And there were no comments other than that one gentleman for that parking space. So again, not a necessity, but in terms of safety concern, it was the other side of the road. That was the larger safety concern. So there's a possibility to add those back.
I would be agreeable because there's a new build going up right across the street from there with just 2 units.
Got it with the block.
Am I on the wrong block?
Yep.
Oh, is that across the
Yeah,
road?
it's just north.
Across from the new house in St. Clair, Alexander, Riverside Veterans Park.
New house, let's go right.
The new house section off. the north.
That's up.
So that's Alexander right there, like that.
Yes.
Okay, I'm on the wrong block.
So if you look at my arm, Michigan is this way. Alexandra is going that.
And then
So that empty space there.
The empty field is a new house.
it's the new house. It's 301 Alexander.
Oh,
Okay.
it's a new, it's a bungalow
Yeah.
with a ramp on it.
Yeah.
New
Okay,
build.
okay, all right.
So that would be ideal. But
I think Jim's keeping track of all these decisions we have to make, and we'll, I think we're gonna do both. You are too? Okay.
Sure. So on street parking, is there another slide outside? I think that was The only,
What's the orangish looking one down right at the bottom of that slope? Is that?
those are just the maps, the same drawings they used from the public meeting, so that was the start of the multi-use pathway.
You're welcome.
So in terms of actionable comments that were received at any discussion, those were the ones. So to speak to the turning radii, I'm going to review every intersection to make sure that a fire truck, it meets the minimum fire truck radius, just to, because there was comments related to certain intersections. So I'm going to go through and review, and if there's any changes that are required, that will be covered in detail design. So
Meredith,
Councilor Monkey.
Lydia, Monk in Michigan Ave, there's bulb outs on each end of Monk,
okay,
between Michigan and Alexander,
okay,
and the fire trucks go down there almost daily.
Yes.
Those turns, so
Yeah.
there's,
Yeah.
that would give you an idea.
and
I don't know what, if they're to specification or not, but they are there.
yeah, and there are specifications for that, and the comment we received didn't, just said they had concerns, but didn't say why or provide a turning radius. So a standard, I actually measure this, the turning radius there, and it is over what the standard is for new local roads. So I'm not sure what the concern at that particular intersection was, but again, I'll review it to ensure it's a comfortable enough space. And same with Helena, there was a comment at a public meeting about transport trucks needing to make that right-hand turn. In terms of deliveries, I think a transport truck is a very large vehicle to be making a right-hand turn, especially now that we're turning, making them 90 degrees. So I would see transport trucks in general avoiding that area because of those turns now and finding an alternate route to get to maybe Jones and whatnot. So I'm not too concerned about large transport trucks trying to turn onto Galena. But I will check the turning radius and see how that affects the bulb out. Because at the end of the day, the bulb outs were there to reduce speed and improve safety for turns at that corner. So transport trucks might have to adjust their routes, but I will check that. And if there are any concerns, I'll bring it up to let you know if any significant changes are required.
Can I ask another question on Light and Helena, the one we were just talking about. Now that intersection, right to the, you go past, right away, there's a driveway for the liquor store. Right now, that's a very dangerous intersection because people put their signal on prior to the intersection and they're going to the liquor store.
Mhm.
And there's been a family member I know who's got an accident there because of, turned out thinking they were turning into Helena and they wanted to go on the LCPO. Is there, I know that now we're putting a turning lane in there somehow, like, is there anything that can be done to make that safer? Like, we can't move the liquor store, right?
So we also, with the size of vehicle or trucks that deliver liquor to the liquor store, they need those two entrances.
Okay.
And their property facing Light Street is not wide enough to move it any which way to improve that. So at the end of the day, people have to pay attention while driving.
Yeah.
And there's only so much we can do to improve safety before the onus is back on the driver. You are operating machinery that can kill people. You need to be paying attention. So, we can't change the road so much that, you don't use your brain while driving. So there's only so much we can do. But unfortunately, those driveways are pretty tight.
Yeah.
And all of those businesses receive deliveries from large vehicles. So we do have to have a way for those large vehicles to get in, get out, because those parking lots are not big enough for a transport truck or delivery truck to turn around. So, nature of the beast, unfortunately.
Yeah, it would be perfect if we could solve all the problems with
Yes.
this reconstruction. But,
We can only do so
we
much.
can only do so much. Besides,
And-
that's,
So there's only kind of limits
that'd
to
be,
what we can do.
that'd be dealing with the province.
And speaking of driveways, I did speak to the various owners and operators of the businesses along the section of proposed ironworks and the business on the corner of Front and Light, because of the nature of the deliveries that they receive and the patrons that frequent there, they do really need all the entrances to ensure that there is sufficient flow through the driveways. of concern, and I did mention it to the owner of Ironworks, is that we are taking back the boulevard. It's actually interesting enough, we were standing up front of the building, talking about the parking lot, and there were 3 trucks completely over the sidewalk because there's no parking curbs to keep them from backing onto the sidewalk. Serious safety concern. So again, kind of further supports the concept of taking back the boulevard to create that separation between the parking lots and the sidewalk, because yes, there's 3 trucks completely across the sidewalk. So God forbid.
So while we're on those 2 driveways, can I ask a couple questions?
Go ahead.
So we hired you guys and Paradigm to give us your expert opinion on traffic. Your recommendation was the first driveway at the front and light should be removed. And then the owners come back and said that occasionally it would be an inconvenience for them to enter the lot if a truck is blocking it. Did they give you an indication of how frequently that happens?
No, they didn't. But again, the nature of the business is having deliveries, and to have that, like, there would be no way, just based on how restricted their kind of site is. If they had a transport truck that backed into their loading dock that is there, they would not be able, their patrons would not be able to access the business, right? So that kind of becomes a bit of a safety concern. People expect to go into this business. There's a transport truck there. They kind of stop in the middle of the road trying to figure out, okay, where do I go now? It creates, again, a bit of a safety issue again from that perspective. So it's harder to take something away once you've given it. So to make a case and try to push them to lose that entrance, again, at the end of the day, whether they lose that entrance and their patrons are waiting in the roadway, or there's someone's turning into that driveway and someone behind them has to slow down and wait, it's, again, the onus is on the driver to pay attention to the conditions of the road and the vehicles that are in front of them and make the right choice, whether to brake or go around. So we can only do so much because it's likely on their kind of registered site plan to take it away if they want to, draw a line in the sand. It'd be causing more trouble than the benefit would be provided.
As a follow-up to through you, so your proposal was the first driveway initially, right?
Yes.
And then, okay, so that's fine. And then when it comes to Ironworks, did you speak with the owner about the potential of gaining 3 parking spots in his lot if we were to close up one of those driveways? Did that come up as a benefit so we improve safety, and then there are possibly 3 more parking spots?
No, his concerns were like they're more geared towards kind of a wellness place. So he was concerned with patrons, elderly patients, and their abilities to drive and maneuver around traffic within the parking lot. That was his concern, to lose that entrance, especially with the physiotherapy place. They really needed that connectivity through.
And which driveway was it you were proposing?
The
One,
one
two, three?
closest to CBD's.
One closest to,
CBD's.
oh, okay, yeah.
So further north. So, yes, and again, the one corner of the building is really tight, like the driving lane, because the building's kind of, well, the building's on the bend in the road. It's already pretty tight, so to lose that entrance, it'll make things very difficult for people maneuvering there. And I went out and had a look at what that looks like. My additional concern again was, losing that entrance, and while I was out there, because we're taking back the boulevard, he is going to lose width of his parking lot. And we will need to review his parking lot because I think he will lose parking lot spaces as a result, because there's that one corner of the building that's so tight already. We're taking back the boulevard, we're taking back 2 or 3 feet to make it grass. He's going to lose a few parking spaces, so his parking lot will need to be rejigged and repainted just by taking back this.
And that's why I thought he might have, given that, considered closing one entrance to gain 2, 3 parking spots, potentially 4 based on the width of the driveway.
Yeah, he didn't express concerns about the capacity of his parking lot. He didn't say, we don't have enough parking spaces. That was never a concern. He didn't ask. Even the on-street parking across the road or on the road was not a concern to it at all. So he didn't express any concerns relating to capacity.
So he's actually operating, I know this because he's operating as 3 separate pieces of business. So the first driveway is the gym, and they go in and out of there using the access card. The second driveway is a lot of the older people, the Parkinson's people, the special needs that come in, and the people that come in and use the studio. They come in through the office door, and then the new business is Crossworks. They come in through the end, and they have that parking. So that's why he wants to maintain
And
That's the way you explained it to me.
even the ability for through traffic would be seriously limited for the kind of northern end towards the
Right.
historic CBDs, because so people would have to try to turn around in that space
Right.
to get back on the other
Creating
way.
a dead end.
And with the way that his parking spaces are kind of are lined up, that wouldn't be a possibility for people to turn to get back to the other entrances. So as part of that discussion, and again, taking back the boulevard, we will have to review his parking spaces that are also mentioned to him to improve the sight line around the bend. Currently, his parking lot kind of follows the curve in the road. I'm proposing straightening that up to improve the sight line around that bend. But again, it's within your boulevard. You have the right to do so, but it will have an effect on the configuration of his parking lot. So I think further discussion is warranted with Ironworks to see how taking back the boulevard will affect his.
And as a final follow-up on the driveways, how much liability is this now transferred to the village? And that we have a report here that says for safety and good traffic flow and according to best practices, those two driveways should be removed. And now we're going to put it back.
It wasn't the recommendation for removing those driveways wasn't based on, like, there's no collision history. There's not an issue identified.
Okay.
So it was a recommendation in terms of, I saw there was 3 entrances. And actually Paradigm also brought up the 3 entrances and suggested that an evaluation needs to be done to see if they meet them. And we've done that.
Okay.
And we have shown that it will be more of a concern to lose that and a safety concern for people accessing that business to lose it than it would be to maintain what is already there and has been approved on their site plan.
That's good. Thank you.
He also, and I'm not sure, but one thing we talked about was when the construction comes, he has access to the back of his building from the side of the liquor store. But I don't know if he could incorporate, there might be room to have parking spaces that we don't currently have because of whatever the amount of land is behind, but he did talk about you can come up around
Through traffic tiles.
Yeah. to use the parking lot during construction.
Yeah.
But maybe you could even have some spaces and then they can come.
And
The back.
like I said, whether the onus is put on the business owner to evaluate his parking lot.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not sure how you want to handle that because the boulevard is yours, but I don't know if it was approved on the site plan for him to park all the way to the sidewalk and on the sidewalk. So there are adjustments that are required to his parking lot and that will require an evaluation by a civil engineer. Potentially a survey to determine how we can reconfigure his parking lot to still work despite losing the extra.
It's the same with the CBDs. There's a backyard parking lot, but half the time, I mean, maybe more now, but it used to not get used very much. People just got in the habit of pulling up out front and walking in, and then there's 2 lanes of parking in the backyard.
Yes, and that's where, like, that's the point of the site plan is to provide enough parking spaces for you to operate your business, so. With that, the 2 parking spaces, so I did speak to him as well about his CCAM, that he did lose that recently to the back within his property. And now CBDs is using that boulevard space to park cars, so we are eliminating that, and I'm gonna propose to plant some trees there, so there'll be parks on the beautiful grass boulevard. Because I see that being used as an mission. And it really does hamper the sightlines coming around the bend to have cars parked that close to the road. You can't, between the Ironworks, cars parked along the bend and those 2 spots in your CBDs, you can't see anything around the bend. Like when you try to turn left out, I couldn't see past the cars and it really is a concern. But cutting back the boulevard and cutting back this parking lot will help with those sightlines for sure, which will improve the safety of that 3rd entrance.
If I could just make a follow-up comment on that, what you're saying is when you're walking there, as he said, the trucks overhang the sidewalk.
No, they're on the sidewalk.
Yeah, and then you've got the cars parked
Mhm.
and you gotta kind of maneuver through there to get to the sidewalk again. It's not a very pedestrian friendly area today.
No, it is. Because there were snowbanks, on the grass boulevard and trucks all the way to the snowbanks.
Yeah.
And I did it, I was standing there, I was actually pointing in that direction and looked at me while he did it.
Is the picnic table still there?
There's a picnic table on the sidewalk.
Yeah, there was.
Yeah.
It's a smoking area.
Near Stevie D's,
Yeah.
there's 2 parked cars always now.
Okay, the table's gone.
And that's where the CCAM was, right?
It was, yeah.
Well, I'm glad to see there's movement there.
So, yeah, no, I think the light tree needs to be much more beautiful. Yes, for sure. So yeah, that's kind of really everything that, actual items.
Lauren, did either one of you have any comments? Or, no? Oh, you okay.
I just have a question about the crosswalk. I know we're still gonna cover that. Does it affect any of our grants that we're applying for that we needed to have a connection, like the active transportation aspect of it?
We got a grant to build a walkway, has no requirement for a crosswalk in.
Okay, I was
So-
just curious if there was conditions with that, because I know when we did the tennis court, there was certain things that we had said we would want to do for- to that grant.
Yeah, no, there's never any discussion of crosswalk.
So like the discussion of crosswalk, it has to do with implying who has the right of way, right? So by putting a dedicated crosswalk with a ladder and signage, you are letting pedestrians know that they have the right of way and drivers should stop. Like if you still need to look both ways regardless of whether there's a crosswalk. But again, it gives pedestrians a feeling that, hey, this is dedicated, I don't need to pay as much as I should. But I don't need to have the same level of care as if I was crossing at a non-marked crossing. So by not providing a crossing, you're not saying that people can't cross the road to access the multi-use pathway. You're just saying that you're not going to provide them, like they have a duty to themselves, duty of care for looking both ways and waiting for a break in traffic before they cross. So people can still cross the road wherever they choose. It's just in terms of liability for the municipality, you're not telling them that it's safe to cross the road without looking. So with children especially, they'll see a crosswalk with a ladder and, you know, they think that they can just skip along because they're used to seeing that at, you know, a signalized intersection or a stop sign. And by providing that ladder, you're giving that impression to the pedestrian. So that's why we don't want to provide ladders unless we are properly providing a proper crosswalk in a proper safe location, because that would open you up to liability to provide that ladder or that crossing. So by not having the ladder, pedestrians can still cross and access the multi-use. It's just, you're not saying that, yes, it's safe to cross here without looking.
Follow-up question on that crosswalk thing, just to build on that. So I think it was my understanding that the crosswalk was also going to serve as a visual hazard to try to control speed on that roadway.
Along that straight run.
Yeah, so now if we opt to just remove it completely, and yeah, we will have a bulb out at Albert and Helena, and that will conceivably slow people down somewhat. Are we at risk of in 3 years from now having these speed complaints back on our desk because we got this straight drag strip down the road?
That's even with that speed hump there, it's still a consideration that they can speed from the hump to the next, you know, so again, like the onus is on drivers to follow the rules of the road. So speeding really is an enforcement issue. But again, not having, like we had the benefit of having that mid-block crossing provide a double benefit. We can still look at putting speed humps and we can still look at putting kind of bump outs along that straight run to give the impression of a visual narrowing, to encourage people to slow down, even if we do those bump outs at the, like where the mid-block crossing was, have the street narrow and then go back into parking, we can still provide those as a kind of visual and not have a crossing there. And in the future, we want a crossing, great. If not, you know, put some trees there. But again, that visual narrowing will again encourage people to reduce their speed. They did it, as an extreme case, in Grand Bend when you go down the strip. They have bulb outs and you don't even know what the heck is going on when you're driving down there, because you have to really pay attention because there's so much visual interest with how they've done the parking and all that. It makes people pay attention more. So we still have an opportunity. Council does want to add additional kind of bump outs into the road or even speed humps at certain locations along the straight run, so that it's still an option if you really do feel that it's warranted at this time. Or speed humps can be added, you know, once the reconstruction is done. If there's still a speed issue, they can always be added after the fact.
Just to follow up on that. So that bump out mid-block, if we were to go with that, would have the mandatory signage, like the yellow or black signage in it to identify the bulb out? How would it be identified if I'm driving two cars abreast, if there's a curb right in front of me?
So the parking zones will have a white line
Yep.
along the parking zone. So you should not be driving outside of that driving lane. So the bulb out will meet that white line.
Yep.
Right. So it visually, it's it's a straight run, it just gives you the impression of not having the road width to speed and
Mhm.
drive like a crazy person.
So it
So
wouldn't have like a post with like the yellow and black.
it doesn't, because it's a parking lane, it's not a driving lane. So if I had 2 lanes of traffic driving
We
lane,
were eliminating that lane.
and I wanted to kind of merge a second lane in, yes, I would have to properly signage, reduce lane ahead
Right.
and signage like that. But because that parking zone is not a driving lane, you don't need to mark it as such.
And I'm just sort of thinking like roundabouts, they put trees in the middle so you don't just drive across it, right? So, but if you shouldn't be driving in that lane, although I've seen people drive in the parking lane on Michigan Ave, for example.
Yeah.
But there are no bulbouts, so that's why.
Yeah. And again, that will help with that. But again, like the onus is on the driver to follow the rules of the road, pay attention to signage.
Paper parkings.
This would be like the new construction on Indian Road, where they took the lane out, put the parking in,
Well,
from Lake Shore. Just recently on Indian Road.
not the one with the parking.
No, let's hope it's not that bad, yeah. Is that a different engineering firm that did that?
So I think it was in-house.
Okay.
So, but we are doing the roundabout and the intersection of Murphy. But again, that goes from 2 lanes narrowing down to 1, and there's proper signage for all.
Just another comment on the bulb out there. That would eliminate some parking spots, though, right?
Yes, it would.
And that's a contentious issue right? With people on St. Clair.
But it would be a contentious issue by certain people,
Yes, yes,
very select few.
in that for
But
the
again,
crosswalk.
But again, because we're not putting a crosswalk there, so with the crosswalk in the location it was, I had to eliminate parking within 30 meters ahead and 50 meters after. So by just doing the bulb out, you're only losing the parking space or 2 that bulb out is physically taking up. So you're not losing the 30 and
You're
50
not
meters.
losing the whole,
No.
okay.
And again, like on-street parking, dedicated on-street parking, like it's not a right. The parking spaces for that. So if you have to walk 30 seconds to a space a bit further up, again, it's, what's worse, having people speed, go 70 kilometers an hour in a 50, or losing a couple of parking spaces and having to walk 30 seconds further to a parking space. It's, again, it's never going to please everyone.
The whole new redesign of the road was designed to slow cars down. The other crosswalk, for example, was adding extra.
Yes.
So we still have the design change that is to affect speed. And as you say, if you feel like if down the road, there's something still wrong or missed, that it could be added in.
In terms of the speed hump. And
Yeah.
I mean, you could add anything. It's just a matter
Yeah.
of maybe digging into a new road
Yeah.
to add additional spots.
Okay.
So, I mean, at this point in the straight run that we have, when we propose that crossing, if we do the bump outs, 1 or 2 bump outs along the straight run strategically placed, if those bulb outs are in the road and in the future you want to put a pedestrian crossing, it would be a matter of adding the curb cut, the signage, and then having the no parking zones. So by having those there's potential for a future crossing if you need it, but also the benefit of speed control and potentially putting in a speed hump in applications to address speed. So the big question with that is, and how many do you want? If that's the direction. you wanna go.
An individual bump out would only need to be 5 meters maybe instead of 50.
I would, there's standards that kind of say what the kind of minimum recommended ones, because you want them to be significant enough to make cars feel like they need to pay attention and narrow. Because if it's just a small in and out, then it's just something. Kind of like, oh gosh, sorry, on Michigan when they went around, I'm glad they went around that beautiful oak tree, but that kind of bumping and it kind of seems out of place. And when things seem out of place or odd, it kind of causes concern for drivers when they see stuff they don't expect. And, so there are minimum kind of elements that we do follow.
So we have some decision points. we could- The first one, the parking in front of the police station. We could add, she's taken out 2 spaces, she could safely add 1 back in if you like. That's a decision.
So we do this through motions or just a recommendation? Or what do we, what's our, how we handle this?
It'd be nice if we do it by consensus, but if it needs to, if there's not agreement, then we need to have a motion.
We're just trying to collect the information and do it all at once then.
Yeah.
Just to say, yes, on
Just-
this, no on this.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if I may, through to Lydia, if you put the parking spot back at the police station, it will be in front of the driveway to their garage, correct?
Nope, so the parking, like in front of their garage is a driveway,
Mhm.
so it is just north of that, 1 space just north of their first driveway.
So between
Past the
the
sidewalk.
garage driveway and the driveway to their parking lot. there would be
There's
one
not enough space there, so it would be between Michigan and their first driveway, closest to their first driveway.
Oh, okay, so it would be before the first driveway,
Yes,
okay? And then there'd be no parking in front of the 2 driveways.
yes, there's no parking in front of any driveway ever,
So there's 2 spots there now.
yes.
Okay.
But he-
Do they hold people there? at all?
No,
Okay, that's the only thing I was thinking, if they have to park further away and are holding somebody to
If they ever do take somebody in, I believe they open the overhead door. and-
go in the garage.
Go in that little driveway.
Yeah, that's what
Or
I'm just
pull in
thinking.
as close as they can and take them in.
Yeah,
For their
But I don't
policing
think-
purposes.
but I do too, but there would be a ramp to that garage, they could
Yeah.
drive up there.
Okay, that's,
Councilor Drury.
For the, so all we're losing to provide the space back is part of the bump out? Is that what we're giving up?
The length of the bump out.
Okay.
So the bump out's still there, it's just the length.
We'll
of the
just
bump
lose the
out.
length of it. Okay, thank you.
Comment on that. That area today is mostly used for officers parking, not personal vehicles, not cars very often. So I live right around the corner, so I see it all the time. That's where, because they're so stuck in their lot, personal vehicle parked there most times. So
so are you saying that's a need they have, or you don't think it's necessary?
well,
I say it's a need.
I say it's a need.
Yeah, okay, I was just trying to clarify that.
So they need to put the spot back.
It's a need to put the spot back.
Yeah.
And then we had talked about that briefly, because I made a note on my drawing here last meeting. We talked about that briefly. I thought we just only have 1 rather than 2.
But that means they would have to just walk further from past their driveway, because there are parking spaces further up St. Clair towards Alexandra. So it's not like there's no options, they just get their steps in.
And they do have 4 spots in their parking lot that, yes, they're difficult to maneuver at times, but at the same time, guys drive for a living and should be able to maneuver in and out of that lot. There's the driveway up the side and then into their spots are supposed to back in. So there is, and it's just easier to park out on the road right now than it is to maneuver the lot and park the cars properly. So that happens all the time.
Well, they also have a lot of visitors because the people that do the highway patrol coming in and use the office occasionally. So it's not just about appointing officers, it's a location for this area.
Well, I think even if they're doing court duty, they have to be in uniform and they have to take a vehicle, I believe. So it's not just our people policing
Yeah.
Edward,
Yeah.
it's kind of a hub for the OPP.
Yeah, close to the Troy.
We give them a spot. One spot.
I say
Yeah.
spot,
Consensus.
give,
Give.
give.
Give 1 back.
I think.
Okay. Stop signs at either Alexandra or Albert. The recommendations is no.
I cannot. I cannot
Oh,
stand it.
it's, you
I
can't
cannot.
do it. Okay,
No.
all right.
I-
I guess
I-
that is not. a
Well,
decision.
Right, find someone, I believe, like,
We couldn't we?
it's unsafe.
Yeah, but we could. It would just be very
I would
unusual.
ask you to put the stop sign in after construction when I don't have to stamp it.
Okay.
Yeah,
perfect.
I mean, that's not following the
Okay.
recommendation.
Yep, no, that's perfect.
Okay.
So I said, no, stop sign.
I thought it was, I misunderstood. So crosswalks, there is an area that crosswalks could go in if you wish to. But the counts don't support the need for it.
We could always add 1 later.
You can, and,
But then we have to do construction, we have to cut.
well,
No, not
at
for crosswalk.
if you choose to put one in the prescribed zone at Charles or Albert, we could put the curb curb cut in now, it's kind of a gray area by providing the tactile plates and curb cut. Paradigm quoted a legal case where a person, a visually impaired person, felt the tactile plate, and even though it wasn't a proper marked crosswalk with the lights, they crossed and got hit. So by providing a tactile plate in a ramp, you are implying to a visually impaired person that there is safety there that perhaps there is not. But it's been done a lot of places with, like, I've seen all the time, that you put in the ramp and there isn't a marked crosswalk. So it's up to you. So in future, if you don't put the ramp in now, you would be doing a curb cut and adjusting that area of sidewalk. So limited scope of work. You're not moving curb or cutting asphalt. You're just cutting your curb and adjusting, the sidewalk.
Well, I think for that, I'd like to propose, or at least put it out there, crosswalk like Easton George Street or Albert Street, St. Clair, somewhere.
At Albert or
Albert,
George?
yeah. Consideration.
Can we maybe put the presentation, the stretch of road?
Fire duty free.
Is there concern that because we're adding this walking path, that if we do have a ton of pedestrians using that walking path in the future, that we would need those crosswalks?
So
There's a lot of factors that into that, population, age, of kind of users, where are people coming from and going to. So you really have to look at the map. Is this a likely flow path from other features within the community to get across to the multi-use pathway? Or the more frequented places are people going to come from Michigan down, cross at Michigan and St. Clair and come down on that side of the road to get to the multi-use pathway? Like, you really have to look at a map and see where people are likely to come from. Because there's no really big draws from Albert and Charles, because it's all residential. So really it's just benefiting the small population in that area, unless it's a through there from a park or another community feature.
So the area I was thinking was either the north or south side of Albert Street, which is the intersection on the right there, to cross over from schools up the street. There's residential, a lot of residential, similar to what Clinton, Wyoming, and what Sarnia have done at very similar intersections. So that's my suggestion. Both, it could create a safer way to cross. It would also create the visual hazard. It would help with speed along there, because I think, and I agree with Mary Ann, the design we created does have potential to reduce speed. But I think a proper crosswalk with the signage and the warnings and all of the other things required to make the crosswalk would create enough of a visual hazard to even slow people down. So that's why
What I would kind of recommend is a kind of a discussion. Maybe we can touch on whether we want the bulb outs without crosswalks anywhere on these straight runs first, because a decision on that will kind of help support whether we put a crossing at one of the intersections.
So if we go with this, I would personally propose no bulb outs during that block.
Yeah, so I
think we will annoy one or two residents in that block by taking away their parking in a block that's predominantly elderly. But by putting it if we put this crosswalk there, you can see on that corner, it's very much a green open space. Now, not to say somebody can't build a house there, but it's because it's the triangleness of it.
Yes.
Really prevents a lot of structure there. So sight lines, in my opinion, are not bad for a crosswalk, but again, you're the expert, so.
Yeah, and again, these locations, it was the recommendation from us at Paradigm to not put a crossing at a controlled intersection, because the danger with the intersection is the turning movements is what causes the hazard at the intersection, which is why I said if we were going to do, bump outs mid-block, it would be a better opportunity to even move between Albert and Charles, have a mid-block crossing, just so that crossing is not at an intersection. And then it would be fair to the Charles Street residents and the Albert Street residents, because they both have to walk equal distance. And then we would kind of get out of the extra safety concern of the turning movement.
The risk there is then we are putting the crosswalk right back in front of somebody's house, and we will get the very same comment as we were getting at 517,
Yes,
right? It's the non-money backyard or front yard in
But
this
it's-
case.
yes, so it is a trade-off that you need to decide on, is it a public complaint versus it's like a safety related thing.
Sorry,
Go ahead, Paul.
what specific turning risk is there at Albert? If we put a crosswalk on the north side of that intersection, like closer to the arena, anybody who comes up Albert Street, I would say 95 to 99% of them are turning left or never turning right. Because coming from that direction, you would take Charles Street. North.
That would be like,
So that's what I'm saying, is there a specific turning risk that we're,
the risk is anytime anybody's turning, like when your eyes are going from forward to shifting, and there's a lot to pay attention to. So just in general, like when you're driving straight, you're looking straight on, the hazards that are coming to you are straight on. So anytime there's turning, there's higher risk. But again, in terms of which side of Albert Street, that's the kind of thought process I work through, is looking at what the higher turning movement is and picking the side that has the less risk. So if
yeah, that's my old neighborhood, right? And nobody ever turns right off of Albert Street there to go on St. Clair. Like, I would say it's 99.9% of
No,
left
and-
turns there.
and then that's a great,
Just something.
That's
that's-
important.
That's an awesome observation because you're right.
Yes.
If you're going down to the arena, you're gonna go down Charles and
Yeah.
turn right. If you're gonna go brewery, you're gonna come up this way and turn left.
Yeah,
So,
so that I just want to kind of clarify
no,
that
it's-
as a
yeah, no, that's great.
location bonus.
No, that's good.
I can make a comment or question. Is this a crosswalk or a crossover?
So,
So are we gonna have lights and everything?
it's based on traffic counts.
Yeah,
So
the
I
light-
actually,
It doesn't warrant the lights, it just warrants
Yeah.
the pavement.
went through that and I highlighted it. So there are kind of tables to work through. So I have St. Clair, on St. Clair from Michigan to Albert warrants a level 2 type D, which is just the crossing man symbol, the ladder, and the advanced kind of stopping line.
Similar to what we've got at Canadera.
Yeah.
That's a site D.
yes.
And Ford Street.
And Ford, yes. Yeah, we had those.
Yeah, so based on the traffic counts, that's what,
No, if I may, I've seen some of those crossings where they put a sign to the pedestrians that says traffic is not required to stop or whatever.
yeah, and I would recommend something like that. Sorry, actually, I was just looking at what I tabbed, and that was for a mid-block crossing in between that section. So I would have to actually look at a corner if it upgrades that or not. But based on AHT values, I don't see that being an issue. But the worst case scenario would be the flashing beacons like you saw on the street.
Yep.
And those would be to the side, no overhead.
But this is no flashers. It's all,
If they warrant it, she says.
I need to confirm
Yeah.
that because I was looking at,
Yeah.
at the crossing
Right.
requirements for a mid-block. So let me
Sure.
just confirm with the corner. Because the mid-block one didn't require flashers. So let me just want to make sure before.
because that's a concern for the residents.
And that's, I mean, in terms of nighttime, you'd have to have a lot of pedestrian traffic, like those people who are out after hours are gonna bother hitting the crosswalk button.
Yeah, yeah.
So really, the people late at night that will be hitting that button will be children. And
We want to solve for children.
you want them to stop for children, so people who are out and about late at night will tend to walk across the street wherever they see fit, because there's no traffic, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
So, and the other, a type D crosswalk, if that was appropriate there,
Mhm.
could be added in after the fact. It's just paint on the road. And
Sorry,
and
where?
signage. If they want to put a type D north of Albert,
be
it's,
just at the intersection.
yeah, just at the intersection.
Yeah.
It's just paint and signage, right?
And the
There's
curb
nothing.
And the curb cut
So
Okay,
and the tactile. thing.
yes.
okay.
It would- and My worry there is it probably costs $50,000 to $75,000 to do that.
Yeah,
It-
I was thinking
rather
it was
than-
just paint.
Yeah,
It wouldn't
Yeah.
matter.
That's what I was
But
thinking.
I don't think it'd be as high as 50, because I mean, your curb is still there, you don't have to touch the curb, because we're gonna do the bulb out anyway, so it's just a bit of sidewalk past the curb, doing the curb cut, and then repouring the tactile plate and the sidewalk area,
okay.
and then doing the line painting and adding the signage. So you're not cutting into the asphalt in any way,
Right.
so it's not that no mid-block bump outs and Albert Street North,
That's just one guy's opinion.
no mid-block bump outs, along the straight run,
Albert Street.
Albert Street North side of Albert Street.
Crosswalk.
Or crossover. Crossover, right?
Well,
Or depending what you.
Crossover,
Depending on what she's-
yeah,
Yeah.
well, there's no, like, there's different levels of crossover. So because
Yes.
it's an uncontrolled intersection, we'll call it crosswalk, so we have crossover and the level to be determined.
If the traffic warrant or pedestrian warrant don't support the flashing lights, can they still be put in?
Yes.
Okay.
And again, if speed on this straight run is still a concern, because, you know, once that this is reconstructed, if you still find that there's a problem and it warrants, you can put a crosswalk into whatever level that you feel is fit for the conditions of the road. Like, these are just guidelines and minimums. But if you feel that's the speed, because the speed, you can always add flashing beacons if you.
And just to clarify too, if we put it in without flashing beacons, but we put the sign with the pedestrian, the X and the pole, because lights and the controller are all solar powered now, there would be no utility work. It would just be mount a solar panel and the hardware.
That's my understanding.
Okay, that's right. So it'd be easy for us to upgrade if we want to go that route.
I'm in favor. Crosswalk.
I'm not. That's my opinion. I don't think. I've walked the area all the time. I don't think we have the volume that it's necessary. We have a busy street on Michigan Ave. We don't have any crosswalks along there to help people. Yeah, no, but
That-
Yeah, yeah, when you think of it that way,
Well,
we
there's-
still don't know what paradigm's gonna
There's no-
suggest to us,
yeah.
right?
so
But we got feedback from Paradigm.
On
So,
here,
Yes.
yes,
they're
but we don't
recommend-
have on the rest of the traffic study they've done
No.
for us.
We do have
So that's right.
recommendations
I forgot about that.
for Michigan as well. They did recommend all boats going into Michigan with an upgraded cross, actually signalized, like crosswalk and crossing across Michigan.
I'd rather spend the money on the Michigan than here.
me too.
So, okay, thanks.
But the cost, just to keep in mind, the cost of this in a whatever $4 million job is a rounding error almost.
Like, I think it's better to put it in now than have to put it in a year.
I agree. I agree.
I think it should go in.
So we're gonna put a crosswalk, the appropriate designed crosswalk, crossover on the north side of Albert.
And I'll review and I'll circulate what the requirements would be for that crossing.
Okay. Parking spots at 204, 206 St. Clair.
202 and 204.
So
206
it's
isn't
good enough.
I support the recommendation.
I think it's not a safety
Yeah,
concern.
Go back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And I agree too. In the comment card, there was a comment about we taking away parking from Veterans Park, in front of Veterans Park. And I just want to make a note that there's a lot of parking in the arena lot. Like especially there's 4 accessible spots right in line with Veterans Park. So it's
It's walking.
people love to get in the habit of parking in the arena to get into the parking lot for like Remembrance Day and other services. It's just, but there is parking
Yeah.
right nearby.
And I think no matter what, the safety along those curves
Yes,
is the primary.
yes.
Exactly.
Parking at the ice cream shop is decided already. You need a decision there.
And you thought there was a consensus and just
Yeah.
calling it a paved boulevard.
Yes.
Right? Those were ones I had. Do you have anything else? Other decision points?
Those were the ones.
Well, there was the recommendation, remove the 2 proposed on-street accessible
Oh,
spaces.
I was going to do that. So it's not, there's no kind of legal requirement for you to provide, and as part of the site plan application process, businesses are required to have accessible parking spaces in the use of their business. So Ice Cream Galore has an accessible space that goes up to an accessible door. And again, CBDs would have had that requirement as part of their site plan process. So I think especially in front of Ice Cream Galore, to say it's a handicap or accessible space would be not allowing anybody else to park there. So their typical patrons or the majority of their patrons would have to walk further to get to parking space. So there's more benefit in having, because they already have an accessible space, and same with police, they have accessible spaces. It's not required.
Just agree to that, or that's.
Well, yeah, if anybody, if there's an objection, by all means.
Sort of negative options, yeah.
But yes, I was gonna. I guess while I have the audience, it has come up a couple times. Paradigm recommended it, and I can come up with the county as well about putting a crosswalk across Michigan. I think that a proper crosswalk that meets the requirements of that road. Because right now, because we're doing St. Clair, we're doing bulb outs on that corner already. The proposal from Paradigm and myself was to do bulb outs on those corners, or at least two of those corners, to shorten the crosswalk distance and provide a proper crossing that meets OTM requirements at that location, because that is a heavily high cross there, like everybody crosses there, connectivity to the park and the businesses along Michigan to get ice cream. I definitely see the benefit.
All the nursery school goes by there every day as well.
Yes. So to have a safe signalized crossing where the onus is on the driver to stop for pedestrians, I think that needs more consideration.
So,
Budget allowing.
yeah, Mayor Hand to Lydia, so if we do those bulb outs into Michigan, when and if we add the signalized crosswalk, we'd have that two bulb outs on the other side.
I would recommend the symmetry
Now,
now.
as part of the scope of this project to continue right past
So
Michigan.
actually, the county actually requested that we mill and repave the top layer of the entire intersection at Michigan
Yep.
and St. Clair. So we're already going into that roadway to
Yep.
do that intersection. So now would be the best time to do that if the crossing there is the best thing for the community.
And are you recommending that we add the sign, do it signage and crosswalk and everything
Yes.
as part of this project right now? Or
I mean,
someday?
I can't spend your money for you. I mean, I can, don't get me wrong, but obviously I don't know what the budget is and whatnot. So I definitely personally see the benefit of crosswalk there versus somewhere else on St. Clair at this time, if there's a tight budget. And you had to pick one or the other, Michigan would definitely have the pedestrian traffic to warrant a crossing, whereas the section on Albert Street, the numbers aren't there to actually require it. But Michigan would require overhead signage and the flashing beacons for sure.
Can we get it priced out?
Provisional item.
Like
Like,
provisional item,
as a
Yeah.
follow-up though, wouldn't it be about the same price as the crosswalk that was in the initial proposal mid-block? It had overhead signage, it had two bulb outs. it
so
had-
I included that photograph as illustration of the highest level of protection,
Gotcha.
because I didn't have counts from Paragon.
Right,
So because that street wasn't busy, it was basically, this is as bad as safe as it can get, and you can see downgrade from there. So that photograph that you see is likely the proper treatment for Michigan based on summertime values.
right. So we're just gonna move it over there. Within the scope of the project.
More or less, but again, we can't speak to your budget, so if the budget was limited and there isn't money for both of the crossings, I could definitely see the community value in the bump outs or the bulb outs and the crosswalk at Michigan based on traffic and pedestrian volumes there. And that was feedback, like at the public meeting, for that, why do we need crossing here? We should do.
And this is a crosswalk to get across Michigan, right?
Yes.
Not to get across St. Clair.
Because there's already a stop sign at
Yeah.
St. Clair, so that is already a controlled intersection, so that crossing already gives pedestrians the right of way.
What about, is there consideration? with Fire hall and the trucks and everything, is that all taken into consideration? You know, if they get an emergency and they're coming out, and there's a crosswalk right there. I
Again,
guess everybody here.
Still is through the street.
Yeah.
Right?
so I mean, I'll consult with fire on this, but the probability of a fire call and someone hitting that button for the
Right.
crosswalk, like fire trucks still have to drive with care. Yes, the people are supposed to pull over and allow them through, but again, like, just because there's a crosswalk or not a crosswalk, like everybody who is driving a heavy, large vehicle at high speeds has a responsibility of care to drive and operate that vehicle properly.
No, I mean, it's definitely one of our busiest crossings and we have had accidents there, not most recently, but that's why the red light or the flashing lights up there was a result of a previous accident.
So
The
that,
concern at that corner.
to put a crosswalk there, like in Paradigm's recommendation, that flashing light would have to come down to allow for the signage for the crossing, the proper signage.
So I think that's a great addition to this. I think we need to go right from top to bottom and make sure that intersection is equally as safe as the others. So I would support.
Yeah, if the county wants to kind of already extend the work into it, because we had it kind of stopping at St. Clair, but they asked to go into the intersection, so the contractor will already have to have the traffic control in order to do that, so.
And I think when you ask, you pay, right? Is that how it works?
Well, hey, boss.
No, not even the county, not even the county. The county asks.
Well,
so-
yes, actually,
Yeah.
so leave Jim to.
Jim can negotiate that.
Leave that in
It's a county
consideration.
road, that section.
Yeah, but they're not.
Yeah.
Well, I already said,
To
if
this
they,
point,
if they
yeah.
wanna,
Yeah, if
if
you
they
want.
wanna shave
Yeah.
and pave that intersection, I asked someone else to be front while we're at it.
Yeah. We can dream.
They're planning to do that. Light and Exxon. Next.
So you'll.
Yeah, well, definitely. But, but yeah, we're responsible for that.
Oh, that turn lane to go on the bridge versus the turning into the light, that drives me crazy.
Off top.
Okay, so an appropriate crosswalk crossing Michigan and St. Clair. to be included. Any further decisions?
Anything else on your checklist?
That was all I had.
It was definitely a no for the bump outs on the straightaway.
I personally think the visual crosswalk will achieve the same purpose, the same goal.
And like we said, even without bump outs, if there's an issue on the remaining straight line, we can look at putting an asphalt bump out on top of the existing thing. If it becomes an issue, but hopefully all the kind of treatments that we're doing. Slow people down. In the summer months, you know, in the summer months, because that's generally.
Yeah, I don't know holes in it.
Okay, any other questions?
I have two regarding the project, but I don't know if they apply to Nick. Should we do them anyways or?
Yeah,
So the one was regarding the water lines for residents from the curb stop to their house. And I saw one comment card where a resident said, I'm in favor so long as you replace my water line. To that effect, or something like that. So
That comment card, I remember it specifically, it was kind of interesting. So I kind of read that in two ways. They didn't specifically ask for the municipality to pay for their water line. They asked if it was, when was the best time to replace the water line, before, during, or after. So that didn't, to me, I read that as, they didn't specifically ask. They just asked whether it should happen before or after.
That couple talked to me, and that was the exact way the conversation went. They want to do it now.
Yes.
But they're here and we're going to change. And cost really was an issue, wasn't an issue at the point. It was like, when should it be done? And, you know, I said, we haven't decided on if we're going to do grants or whatever on, to help them out. But he said, so I should put money in the bank. And I said, well, most likely, yes. You know, so that was the way the conversation went. But I'm glad they did. I asked them to put the note in. I'm glad they did, because it's something that's gonna have to happen at every house along there. There's a new decision point.
Who
So,
pays
Yeah.
is a political decision.
Exactly.
But there are cost efficiencies in carrying provisional items for that. And whether it's if you want residents to pay, but have the contractor do it and that be applied to their taxes. Because the contractor has the road dug up, they'll be digging to the property line where the water service is. So to dig the additional couple feet to bring in the water line, the cost, while the road is already open, would be less than them hiring a contractor separately to come in after the fact or before the fact. So, but again, who's paying and how that gets set up is really,
and through you, Lydia, when do we have to decide that? Like, if that-
now would be the
that-
time I need to know whether I include
You would include
provisional.
in the tender, would you?
Yes,
Yeah.
so if you're gonna pay, I would just include it as your cost, a regular item in the tender.
Yeah.
If you wanted to look at a scenario where there's kind of a payback from the private homeowner that wants to do it, and I carry it as a provisional item, so the contractor only can charge for it if they do it.
Right.
And it's not part of the main contract, so it really depends on how you wanna do it, but now would be the time to know.
And in that instance, would the contractor approach each resident and say, the village has made arrangements for us to replace your water line if you want, here's our quote. And let us know.
I would recommend that you touch base in advance
Yeah,
with the
we-
homeowners and see, just to kind of control the narrative that way.
Yep.
And then for the difference for my drawings, what if you are going to pay as a regular contract item, I would show the replacement of that water line going to each house. So the contractor knows what to bid. So now would be the time to know. It's always better to get a price from the contractor during tendering because you're competitively bidding it versus getting a price once they already have the job and they just.
Yeah, it's a change order.
Yes.
Yeah.
So are you saying it's every house or they're identified the ones that are the lowest or the ones we've had issues with?
That's up to you. You can all, like, depending on when you do it, I would say if you're gonna put the bill for it, I would look at your records and see which ones have been an issue. Or again, if you're gonna put bill, we can have a note saying contractor to investigate any water service that is higher than, that only has this much cover or less gets replaced and carried as provisional item. It depends on how much you want to spend. Or the interested parties.
And so-
I mean, we've only had one winter storm, so winter's just, I mean, is it,
Yeah.
are we gonna have winter?
So we're not in a position to require them at their cost to replace the line. We can't force that on. What we could do is say, this, get a provisional price from the contractor. It's gonna cost you $3,500 if you want to pay it. And if you wish to, you can have some kind of a loan program. Like, we'll pay the money and you repay it back over a period of 5 years. You can do that. I mean, I would want to check with, get our lawyer to draw up an agreement they would sign to make sure it's fully enforceable. But I mean,
You know,
And-
it's been done elsewhere.
yeah, it's a fairly common thing. Quite often municipalities, like it'll be a bond and they'll sell the bonds to somebody else, but I don't think we need to get into that here.
So from my perspective, I'll carry them as provisional items. And then you can kind of work in the background to figure out how you want to collect.
Yeah, I think that offering a 5-year loan at prime or whatever would be, or even at zero.
Can I have a 5-year loan at prime?
Yeah, yeah. But even at zero to entice them to get it
Yeah.
done, because that's what we're gonna go through all this effort, I think, yeah.
That's, I mean, for a little bit of interest in
Yeah.
me, I'm just making a deal. And yeah, because of the work that it might,
Yeah.
Yeah, to
one
calculate.
water break, call our guys at the middle of the night.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
paid.
Yeah, if somebody decides not to because of the interest, yeah.
So carry that in our tender.
So what would be the plan? Would we take that to committee for, how we can work this plan?
Well, I'm not exactly sure yet, but we'll have to make a decision point. So yeah, probably committee recommendation.
And then my second question, if I may, there was a comment, and I did speak to a resident about Stevie D losing their other street parking, and they're on Boulevard parking, and their cross street parking. And they're concerned about them extending parking towards Albert Street and all parking along there, and them losing their parking in the evenings and that type of thing. And they asked us about permit parking and other options, and I know it's not a MIG decision, but your comments and then how council feels about how we can address that.
So I put that in the bylaw enforcement related section. So I mean, CB's has a parking lot. The fact that patrons choose to park on the road, that's not something that you can do anything about. And patrons of CBDs have the right to same rights to on-street parking as the residents do as well. So again, the residents, like, there is no right to on-street parking. You have
There's no
park-
ownership.
There's no ownership. So it's first come, first served. So to say that the private residence is more worthy of that parking space than someone going to CBDs is just not a fair statement. So, I mean, losing the on-street parking, you never know, maybe CBDs will see the benefit of improving their parking lots, but again, we can't make people or say who is more worthy of that space, and I don't think it's fair to have permit parking. Again, that, are the private residents gonna pay for permits to park in front of their own houses? No. And again, CBD or clientele gonna pay for that, and again, to enforce that, permits are only good if they're being enforced. So are you gonna pay for the enforced like bylaw staff to come out and patrol as well? So again, like person going to CBD has just as much right as the resident who is there on the street. And there is no overnight parking through the winter, is my understanding.
Yep.
So it's a very seasonal issue, and it's if people happen to be at
I committed to bring it forward, so it's an excellent explanation, especially when we had asked it after construction's done. So
for
that's-
sure.
Yeah, that's very helpful for us. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. Appreciate all the work that you did to bring together. Give us a summary. That's excellent.
Sorry, I almost forgot, because you brought it up in our last meeting. Tree planting. Tender item or after the fact item. Is now would be a good time to, if it's going to be a tender to carry. Or would you rather a professional kind of landscape company coming after the fact to do the tree planting? And what's my budget?
So you're saying
Food for thought.
the general contractor could do it?
I mean, like we can, like in our drawings, even such for site plans, like I generally have a landscaping plan that has kind of planting details on how to plant a tree in the boulevard. But I don't know if you have a Parks and Rec department that does their own plantings, or if you have an arrangement with a local nursery. They would come in, the level of care that you would get from a nursery planting them versus a general contractor.
I think it would be best to put it as part of the
I do
contract.
too. Like, we don't
And we
have
can make
to.
it, we can make it an item that it has to be done by, like a certified landscape company, so they can
Yeah,
send
they're
it
gonna
out.
bring it, so.
Yeah, all we have is always the
Yeah.
guy doing the sewer line.
It's
plant
again-
trees. I hope.
Yeah, so,
But we still have input into what they plant. We still
Yes.
have that control.
yes.
Just don't have to do the work. No, that's the best.
Yeah.
So, and to that effect, it's including in the drawings, I guess, discussion of what you would like to plant. And the size of things you like to plant, so there are different options in terms of tall and narrow, standard native species versus not. And then the locations, kind of, I will look at the locations based on sight lines, and then determine from there.
It might be also, we have, our boulevard list.
Mhm.
So whatever kinds of trees like to be standardized more, what we already have,
Okay.
and I can't name anything right now, but what we've been planting currently, I want to see the symmetry of staying the same or staying similar.
St. Clair Street always had those little crab apples.
Yeah.
Like some of them
Yeah.
are creeping on 50 years old.
Yeah.
And they're not very big. Like
No.
they're kind of a dwarf
Yeah,
tree,
boulevard
but they
tree.
flower
Yeah.
in the spring. They're beautiful.
Yeah, it's pretty.
There's a lot of kind of native species that are smaller in size than
Yeah.
the conservative
Yeah.
label list, again, making it, maintaining the aesthetic across the. Have a budget in mind, so I will,
How about you figure out how many trees we
Yeah,
need?
yeah.
And we'll go from there.
Yeah.
That's already-
Yeah. and then we'll see.
Reasonable, but
I couldn't even-
reasonable.
I
And then we'll see what to have, so.
Yeah.
my last house in Sarnia, I think I was standard bought in one of the older kind of areas, I think I planted 50. Wow. I'll be reasonable, but no, I think especially maintain that Point Edward aesthetic, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks again. Thank you. The way the meeting went was great.
Okay, move on to item number 2 is a curb cut request at 15 Louise Street. Towards the end of the street.
So what they're wanting to do here, they have applied back in the summer actually for change the curb cut from one side of the property to the other. And now they've come back, this never came before council. Come back and they want to put in, when we increase to allow to complete with 12 meters, they want to put a circular driveway in front of the house. So that's what this request is about. I believe it's the second one.
It's not the one that's really close.
That's what I thought it was.
I don't think it's, because their garage is faced to the north.
It's
So I think
not
it's
very wide.
So it's,
the other one, the one on the other side.
It's Dan's,
The sidewalk.
the people that have already moved in. Giselle, Dan and Giselle, son
And so they want 7 on one side, 5 on the other. It's
Yeah,
not
I'm not
symmetrical.
sure why they would-
I think it's the one's
it's because one's
existing,
existing, yeah.
and I think the pole.
It's always something construction.
You see where the pole's right against the 5-meter wide one? Drawing, so. Will that prevent a tree from being planted on the boulevard, given space between the driveways?
It's the third house in.
Yeah.
From the end. So,
So it's not the one I just said.
The third one?
15.
That's the one that's 300 feet deep.
Oh, so their garage is faced to the north, so unless you're gonna come circular and then go up to the house, yeah. That'd be a lot of driveway.
No, that was the other one. They're-
15's gotta be the other. There's 19 and 15, right, that they're building?
No, it's 13.
Well, the application says 15 right on it.
13 and 15, okay, I thought it was 19. for some reason. Okay, sorry. I walked there the other day and I was confused.
Next thing's was.
I wouldn't think prevent on boulevard.
It's tight, but I think we work it, type of tree too, yeah.
So someone wants to make a motion.
I'll move to support staff recommendation. Go ahead with the second cut.
I'll second that. Second cut.
Seconded, second cut. All in favor?
Conservation bylaw.
Going to one.
I'll move that bylaw 08 of 2023, being a bylaw to confirm the resolutions of Point Edward Council, which were adopted up to including February 7th, 2023, be read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed on this day, February 7th, 2023.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Move for adjournment.
I'll move for adjournment.
I'll second it.
All in favor?